As we approach the closing of this year's Parrot Crisis Action Summit, I am honored to introduce our closing keynote speaker, Dr. Pat Lattis, one of those most prolific forces in avian welfare today, and a woman who wears more hats in a week than most of us do in a lifetime. Pat serves as the co-chair of the IUCN SSC Wild Parrot Specialist Group and serves on the steering committee for the Parrot Researchers Group. She participates in the AZA-sponsored Wildlife Conservation Network and the Wildlife Trafficking Alliance. She is a member of the Parrot Conservation Alliance, as well as the International Alliance for the Protection of Parrots. That's the IAPP, that's us. And as an artist with a certificate in scientific illustration, she donates her art liberally to conservation organizations as well as to avian welfare nonprofits who stand against captivity for parrots. Dr. Lattis collaborates regularly with SoCal Parrot, the only licensed wildlife rehabilitation and release facility for naturalized wild parrots in Southern California. She has been an invaluable consultant and participant in large-scale wild parrot confiscation efforts involving poached birds and eggs alike. Pat Lattis is a veterinarian, a conservationist, a scientist, a researcher, an artist, and an activist. Welcome, Pat Lattis.
Gosh, thank you. I guess that explains why I'm so busy all the time. And first of all, I want to say thank you so much, organizers, for putting this together, all the panelists and participants. It's just been a wonderful day. Thank you all for participating. And I'm truly humbled to be here. I've got a lot to talk about. Those that you know me know I can jabber on forever. So I'm going to go ahead. I'm going to share my screen and get started. I'm going to talk today, not wearing any of those hats really that were just described, but as a participant in a really huge operation, and where all the things that everyone talked about today and that we've talked about in the past have come together. This is about, sorry, I have background helper, Operation 33 Kilos. Now, that sounds like a drug bust, and indeed, in a sleep-deprived moment and probably faulty math, Brooke and I came up with this name for this project because it was our guesstimate that we probably had 33 kilos of birds. So that's how this name came to be. But I just want to say it's been quite an experience. It's ongoing, and it will continue into the future. But it does offer some lessons how we might possibly be able to mitigate the parrot crisis from the lessons that we've learned from just a horrible tragedy. Now, just a quick reminder, I am involved in conservation at some level, and I have to remind everyone here that the entire order of Psittaciformes is under threat. There are about 400 parrot species, and a third of them are in danger of extinction. Now, I want you to put that in real numbers. That means in the next few years, 130 species could be gone for good from the wild. Just think about that. Think about your favorite species. They could be gone and not able to come back unless we help them. And nearly all of all the parrot species, about half of them, even if they're not threatened with extinction, are in severe decline. There's a lot of reasons for that. Parrots face threats. Anything you can think of, I can probably figure a way to make it a threat to parrots. So it's just a very small thing. It doesn't include things like climate change and pollution and natural disasters and so forth, but it's a huge web of threats. So this Operation 33 Kilos was the perfect storm. And everyone here today and everyone that works with parrots across the entire globe fits into one of these little ovals in this Venn diagram. Pet parrots, breeder parrots, hoarders, parrot sanctuaries, parrot rehab, parrot conservation. And that's bad enough that all those things overlap, but they're much more complicated than that, because in between them, inside of them, And within all of them, there are many networks, many crossovers, many bridges, and many conflicts. So just basically today, I'll narrow down some of this to the unfortunate, unwilling immigrants to the United States. SoCal Parrot is wildlife rehab, and their sister organization is the Southern California International Avian Confiscation Center. And I'll say SIAC from now on because I can't say all of those words together. Currently, those two organizations hold or care for more than 100 parrots that came from confirmed smuggling. 75 of those birds represent 5 endangered species. These birds are wild caught and they act wild. They're suitable to return to the wild, but there is nowhere for them to go. Even if we knew where they came from, and some of them we do, they can't go home. There's no safe place to go. They'll just enter the trafficking organizations again. A SIAC is basically a subsidy, a yeast budding its offspring to provide for victims of wildlife trade. It was formed to be a facility to provide isolation and care to confiscated parrots. So SIAC right now is involved with a 200 plus parrot confiscation that all happened at once. Some of those birds are trafficked, they're wild, and they're wild caught. Some of them are from parakeet mill breeder birds. Some are just opportunistic purchases for someone to sell at street fairs and flea markets and whatnot. Some are hoarder birds, and all of them together were with the hoarder birds. Again, there's nowhere for these birds to go. The zoos, quite rightfully, don't want them because of infectious disease risk. Sanctuaries are full and overflowing, and ditto the disease. And again, the wild ones, even if we knew where they came from, they can't go. So this is all the problems that all of us face every day. And we're going to talk about the real life consequences of the pet trade, the legal and the illegal. And again, I have to extend my deepest and heartfelt sympathy as well as my gratitude to the true parrot warriors. There are at least 7 organizations, most of which are attending today. And I'm sorry if there's more than that. I don't mean to leave anyone out. They provided 30 volunteers and more. Some of those volunteers came back for several tours of duty. SIAC is fortunate to have sponsored 15 and more interns. There's more on the way. And there's 3 staff. And they're extremely generous donations and gifts from parrot people all over the world. That's how we managed to do this. So now I'm going to tell a long-winded story. It's very complicated, and I've actually made it more simple than the real truth of it. So we'll start out with the saga. It started out in January of this year, January 2025. Now, that's winter time in the Northern Hemisphere, and a lot of us were doing our really boring wintertime work. It's a slow time for rehab. It's generally a slow time for sanctuary work, and it's a slow time for confiscations from law enforcement. So I was doing very boring administrative work, and my fire app went off. Now I have a fire app that covers all of the Western United States. I live in Arizona, but this one had an urgent alert for California, and it popped up Pacific Palisades. Now, that caught my attention for 2 reasons. It's a very dangerous place, Southern California, when there's fires, and I have friends and family that live there. So you all probably remember where this story is going to go, but this was my first response. What's next? This is a disaster. How am I going to be involved with this? It was horrific, absolutely horrific. And you all know that. The animal shelters and the Humane Society is completely overwhelmed with lost pets, with pet refugees, with wildlife. And Pasadena Humane Society works closely with SoCal Parrot anyway, and they requested assistance to find placement for birds that needed a temporary place to stay while their owners found a place to live. SoCal Parrot stepped up. And some of you remember I called out for help because I could see this was going to be a really bad thing on all levels. So I was involved just communicating and trying to help. But SoCal Parrot managed to this is Toby. So SoCal Parrot was able to take care of 30 birds for quite a long time until their people found placement themselves. These fires were horrendous. I think I'll have PTSD on this for the rest of my life. But wait a minute, that's not LA. That's just outside of SoCal Parrot's actual facility for rehabilitation. If you look at the air quality map there, where that little white circle, it says 482 air quality, that is approximately where SoCal Parrot's facility is. Now, luckily, they have a very good disaster plan. They instituted it, and a construction company helped in the evacuation of more than 150 wild parrots, wild Amazons mostly. And I could tell you those big construction boys, they squeal like little girls when Amazon parrots grab those big meaty fingers that happen to go through the bars. So these 150 plus birds got to have a short vacation in the offices at the construction company. As you can see here, this is little Duncan, and he wasn't real happy about it. But wait, okay, there was the fires in LA. There's an evacuation of the people and parrots that I love. You have to remember that SoCal Parrot is an official member of the Wildlife Confiscation Network. And back in January, we had a quiet little heads up that there might be an operation going on in undercover investigation of trafficking, so that we needed to be ready to take in parrots that had been confiscated. So in between disasters, yep, WTF again, because this showed up on social media. Now, this was kind of a bungled operation, totally justified. This was for animal cruelty, the severest charges of animal cruelty that you can have in California. And unfortunately, it interfered with the undercover operation. But a state California Fish and Game person got in contact with us. Could SoCal Parrot take care of some potential confiscations? Well, the answer was yes, but the facility, the SIAC, was scheduled to open later in the spring, and this is the state of that building when he gave us a call. So Brooke was great. She begged that they find placement for those birds for a couple of weeks so that the building could be made functional. And it actually happened. It was incredible. This is a little building that was completely renovated, gutted inside, and was supposed to open, say, in May, but this was February. Yeah, it's my favorite. This is now my favorite meme. So the rescue commenced. Facility for the birds were destined is about 2 hours out from the facility where they were being held at a animal shelter. We left at about noon for our 2-hour trip, and right before sunrise, we arrived because the biggest winter storm that had ever hit California was hitting with hurricane force winds, flooded freeways, wrecks all over the freeways. So it took us nearly 7 hours to get there. So here we are. We're suited up. The people in the animal shelter, we had to request wear masks, and I'll explain that in a minute. But you see the floor is wet. That's because the roof is leaking and all those towels and blankets were soaked. So in this facility, not everything was alive. It's an animal shelter that had almost no experience, actually no experience with avian species at all. Some of you may recognize the bird on the left. That's our patient number 001, who we came to call Barry. And he was the first bird I looked at in this facility. And my immediate comment was this bird is in critical condition and needs to be in ICU right now. The staff there are very kind-hearted, but very inexperienced. They were quite proud of the fact, if you look at the Amazon on the right-hand side of the screen, the cage looks pretty clean, but that's because there's no poop in there, because that food bowl is only filled with seed hulls because they did not know parrots hull their seeds, and that bird probably hadn't eaten for 4 or 5 days. Not their fault, they just didn't know. So we need to help training some of those people. Once again, my little bunny, what the F? So we loaded up the approximately 200 birds, because we didn't know actually how many there were, to be transported from the animal shelter to the facility. And then we found out about 30 birds were not there and needed to be transported in through the flooded freeways, the flooded towns, to the animal shelter so we could take them. So we had to wait for those birds to arrive, and we finally left the facility. I think it was around 11 o'clock. I don't know. I'd lost track of time. But on our way back through the trashed filled freeways strewn with wreckage, we had some more adventures because we had a flat tire with 30 birds in the car, some on my lap, and we had to shift them around to get the spare tire out, which didn't work. We had to get towed and blah, blah, blah. So the birds were handling this magnificently. They were like, oh, well, something else is happening, and handled it actually much better than I did. Meanwhile, back at the facility around 10 o'clock at night, the last flight had been assembled, and the first refugees were starting to find their way and be put into the proper housing units. Okay, so Brooke and I finally got back to the facility. It was probably around, I don't know, 2 o'clock, 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock in the morning. Finally got all of our 30 birds situated, got treatments and ICU on board for everybody that needed that. I went back to the dormitory for a couple hours nap, got up early in the morning to see how many died. Nobody died. In fact, we had very, very small mortality rate, I think 3 early on. But anyway, came back from my lunch break, really tired. I look up at the sky over the facility and hey, there's a fire kind of headed our way. Well, I was too brain dead. Yeah, this again, too brain dead to say, well, we might have to evacuate these evacuated 200 birds, but we didn't. So happy story. The picture on the left is two young macaw chicks that were at the shelter, and then a picture of them on the right a couple days after we had them. Very clean now. Their tummies are full, they're fat and happy, and they just look great. Here's patient 001, who is looking great. And then a bunch of very hungry, ravenous, and very dirty Amazon parrots that did nothing but eat for about 2 weeks. Some lovely macaws, adults, and they look sweet and adorable, but actually the guy there in the front, his eyes are filled with rage, as several of our staff, interns, and volunteers probably have nice scars sorry, I'm losing my. They have scars to prove it. He was full of rage. You can all still hear me? Okay. This is the Amazon flight, and I put this in because this is probably the last time that cage was 100% clean. Those of you who work with Amazon parrots can understand what a challenge that is. And here they are, first released into that cage. That's about half of them. The other half, they're terrified, absolutely terrified. The other half of them are on the bottom of the cage, piled up in a corner. And really, for about a month, those birds did not go anywhere in that flight without touching at least two other birds. I don't know what they went through, but it was horrifying. And to this day, they really don't trust people, even though we respect their needs as much as possible. They're still terrified. It's horrible. These birds would have ended up in someone's home. It wasn't just the big guys, but the little white-fronted parrots. Again, wild caught to this day do not trust people, and they've known nothing but kindness from the staff and volunteers at SIAC. The ones that aren't terrified are the 100 green cheek, maroon belly, morphs, hybrids, etc. Have never shown a moment of panic. I have a rainbow assortment of Indian ringnecks, which their proper name is rose ring parakeets. And again, this was right after these birds went into these cages. They're not scared, they're just exhausted from the terrible adventure they've been through. So some practicalities about dealing with the consequences of the pet bird and wild bird trade is logistics. 200 birds require a lot of planning. Now, we had planned to have 200 birds in this facility, but not all at once. We thought maybe there might be as many as 200 birds go through that facility a year in little batches of 10 or maybe 20. 200 all at once. We have to think about this. Luckily, all of your generous donations to the LA fires resulted in a lot of surplus of supplies and food. So we were able to take care of that until the deliveries started coming into the isolation facility. Now, why is all of this important to the pet trade, to illegal trafficking, and to humans and to birds in human care? Hoarder birds and confiscated birds are a very real, very serious risk. We didn't know right away when this confiscation happened, but we found out it was a psittacosis outbreak. While those birds were at the animal shelter, there are actually several people that became sick. And the plan that they had, that we had to convince them was not a good one, was to adopt those birds out. Now, those birds with psittacosis could have infected many people, and they could have caused illness and death in beloved pet parrots in the home, and it would have been terrific heartbreak, sickness, death, and eventually euthanasia because they did not have the capacity to deal with something like that. Here's just an example. We did a lot of testing of these birds. So I'm going to go through this and then I'll try to speed up a little bit. The first pie there with all those slices is a compilation. None of these are statistical, they're just illustrations. All of the microbes, the microorganisms of potential concern from doing pathogen and microbiome studies. So that's quite a few, actually. That's quite a lot of things that could be an issue. The middle pies, the one that's all yellow, that are all of the positive psittacosis PCRs. 100% of those were from the Amazons. The pie below there is another terrible zoonotic disease, an intestinal parasite called Cryptosporidium. And again, the Amazons win that prize. But basically, that potentially zoonotic infection was in all the birds and could be a risk to human beings. The last pie there is all of those things, all of the microbiome organisms, all the PCRs, all of the bacterial cultures and identification that we did, all of the fungal cultures identification we did, and a few other testing. And you'll see that our friends, the Indian ringnecks, the rose ring parakeets, win that prize. They had a total of 22 potential bad pathogens. The 100 green cheeks only had 6 little friends sharing their biomes, and the Amazons only 5. There's about 30, about 30 Amazons, 5 pathogens, but unfortunately they win the prize for zoonotics. The 4 macaws that we had only had three things of concern, and one lonesome little cockatoo all by himself had five really bad things. One of those was Cytosine beak and feather disease. Cytosine beak and feather disease means purgatory for rescued parrots because no one wants them in their facility, and it's totally understandable. The risk is very high, and there's a lot of uncertainty. Now, I'm working on some projects that might help understand and mitigate that uncertainty, but still, it's purgatory for these animals. Nobody wants them, nor should anyone take them in right now, as far as we know. So they suffer great stigma. This little guy in the center there, that's a green cheek that's got early sort of acute appearance of an infection of beak and feather disease. A normal appearing one is on the left side of the photo there. And you can see the green cheeks were responsible for 40% of the beak and feather positives we got. Now, again, this isn't statistical, it's just illustrating the testing that we did. It's full of bias, so I just an illustration. Now, do any of you people out there in the audience recognize this place in Hawaii? This is the old leper colony where people were sent in the Hawaiian Islands that were suffering the terrible scourge of leprosy. Now, I think of cytosine beak and feather disease as a hybrid of HIV/AIDS because it is a primary immunosuppressive disease and leprosy because of the stigma and the fear. That's how I think of cytosine beak and feather disease. But just to show you, there are some hopeful things happening in the world of people that study this disease. We'll start with this little guy that showed acute external signs. And then a little bit later, when his immune system kicked in and started getting rid of the many side effects of having an immunosuppressive virus, including the fact that we were aggressively treating any co-infections. And the last one there is him just recently. Now, we haven't tested him, but he's reverted back to normal appearance externally, which has been shown to be correlated pretty closely to the status internally. In other words, he may test negative now. He might also test negative and be a carrier, or he may test positive, look normal, and be a carrier or have a latent infection. So it's a very complicated and mysterious disease. Okay, we've got 200 birds. We've got beak and feather disease. We fixed the psittacosis. That's all gone now. What? There's more. Yes, there's more. Remember, we're a member of the Wildlife Confiscation Network? Yeah, yeah. Oh no. What now? This was happening now. This is just 3 confiscations that we know of out of about 20 across the United States and somewhere between 10 and 15 confiscations just right next door to SoCal Parrot's facility, actually, ironically. Oh yeah, see this cute little bird? This is a baby Nanday. This is the first tiny uh, nestling I'd ever seen. So even though I've worked with Nandays my entire professional life, I'd never seen a baby one. I know, terrible. But that was an indication. That was one of the first chicks that came into SoCal Parrot. It's baby season now, and there's lots of him. That's him as he's growing up and his many multitude of friends that came in afterwards. But you know what? Somehow it all worked. And it's partly because of the huge networking of all the parrot-loving people in the world and in our region and in our nation. And it's because of our amazing parrot warriors. SoCal Parrot has an extensive volunteer network, and SIAC developed an even larger one. All those volunteers, all those crazy people that came back for more, and all the interns, it worked. And here's the people that we need to thank. These are why Almost all of those birds are still alive. We had three deaths very early on, very, very sick birds that we could not save in spite of heroic efforts. So we've done really well because these people have given their all. And here's the facility on kind of a quiet morning. There's what they eat. Oh my God. Gourmet restaurant, happy interns, and more or less happy incarcerated parrots. We have a pretty good setup for veterinary care and diagnostics. Here's a little guy that suffered a pretty bad injury from his old nasty band that he came with. He's doing well, by the way, doing well and very happy. The interns got lots of on-the-job training. They learned how to capture, restrain, handle, and do procedures, especially with the Amazons was, as you all well know, a very quick and rapid training curve. They learned how to do a lot of different things. Here they're banding. And yes, we banded these birds, even though philosophically none of us like that, but we had to have very careful individual records and keep very careful medical records on these birds. So we had to do that. Hopefully those bands will be pulled off as soon and if they find placement. I learned a lot just personally. The slide on the left there is a veterinary student intern doing her first necropsy on her first bird patient. And I'm behind the camera 300 miles away coaching her through it. So that was a unique experience for me. And I realized what it was like way back when I was young and I didn't know anything. So it taught me a lot just doing that. I enjoyed working with the interns and the staff, so dedicated and so eager to learn. They learned lots of stuff, especially about Amazons, um, these medical procedures, learning how to inject the world's worst injectable antibiotic, and just learning some tricks of the trade and techniques. And those interns and volunteers were there for our special needs birds. Some have pretty devastating things like visual impairment, and they gave them the time, effort, and care that they needed. And we had a little time for some humor. I came in one morning. This was on my veterinary board. Look at Butt Boy. Okay, that's only funny because this was a little ringneck that came in. His wings were severely trimmed right at the actual arm itself. His tail had been trimmed, so he had been a fall injury bird all along, and he was discovered to have his entire cloaca split open, a wide open gaping wound that actually made us think about euthanasia, but we didn't. He recovered. He's now flighted and beautiful, and no one calls him Butt Boy anymore. Don't forget to worship your vet. SIAC is improving. There's now four portable units that have bolstered the space and capacity. More is coming. And my last slide, what will the future bring? Networking and mutual aid. We now know pretty much everybody in the parrot world, and we're not afraid to ask for help, and neither should you be. Resilience of the birds. I can't believe they've lived through this. I can't believe the humans have lived through this. And that little bit of hope, which Laura Kim calls faith, I call both of them. We have hope for wild birds everywhere in the world. We want to change things for the better for pet birds and birds living in human care, birds everywhere. We want to work for better lives for parrots everywhere. And I hope that SIAC will continue to work with these birds that are positive with beak and feather disease. This is going to probably a lifetime effort for them. We hope that we can find placement for them, but we're prepared to go as far as it takes to make their lives better as best we can. Thank you. Thank you for putting up with my long-windedness.
Bravo, Pat, Brooke, all your people. Thank you. Thank you so much for sharing that with us. And I was asked to wrap up the whole conference in 2 minutes. So.
Oh no, I'm so sorry.
No, 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 you did it. you helped us wrap it up because I'm just going to talk about some of the themes we heard really quickly. Is turning the tragic into magic. I heard that today. And you gave an example of that, Pat. And this whole conference is that. We heard about being in solidarity, having compassion and empathy for people who are different from us, but we need each other. I heard this in every presentation. I also heard you got to keep at it. You got to start young. You have to be persistent. And in the conservation group, you need long-term commitment. We want to have you be a part of IAPP, join it. Joining it is just getting on the newsletter list. Instagram, please come on to Instagram and see all about that. Our Slack channel, you can find your people, network, give support, organize, just do whatever you want. This isn't a top-down organization, it's bottom-up. And finally, some of the last things that I heard was don't be afraid to risk, such as taking in all those birds when you didn't know if you had the resources. Pat and Brooke and all the other rescues and all our groups here. And don't be afraid to fail. Fail mightily, because that's how we learn and go forward.